A change here over the last 10 and a half months or
Yeah,
so.
most definitely. So, anyway, we'll just do a quick roll. We've got Chris Goldman's here. I see Dana Miller's here.
Here.
Edna's here. Houston's here. And we're just waiting on Corey and Sam Perry. Okay. Had an opportunity to look at the agenda. Can I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Okay, Edna.
I'll second that.
A second by Dana. Thank you. The minutes from the May meeting are still in development. We will do that in July, hopefully. And we'll then have the May and June minutes to review and approve, and so forth. So going from there. Okay. Do we have anybody, Sam, on wishes to make a public comment at this time?
No, sir, we do not. No
Okay.
virtual attendees.
Here comes Corey. Okay. Corey, you're looking good there. Anyway, so continuing along, I think what was the first thing on the agenda, Sam, keep me honest. I wanted to get everyone together to give you a brief update. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to review it. I sent it out on Friday. Is the deliverables. We've had the first two deliverables for the strategic and comprehensive plan that the city is developing. The first two deliverables focused on the existing conditions or current state, as well as the questions we would like to see incorporated into the survey that is being sent out. Sam, correct me if I'm off on the dates, but that's going to be late summer, early fall for the survey.
October is what we're looking at right now.
Right. And the thing with it is, I just wanted to brief everyone. We'll get into the document itself in a moment. I'm just going to hit on some of the highlights. I'm not going to read it, go through it line by line. We did have a steering committee meeting. It's actually the second meeting we've attended. First one was in Zoom. The second one was a in-person meeting we had about a week and a half ago, I think it was. Jessica and Sam were presenters on that. The steering committee was brought together, probably the largest steering committee I've ever been involved in, but it was good to see everyone. There was representation from the different commissions and boards for Oxford, as well as there were representation there from Miami University. Oxford Township was there. We had the library. We had a number of people and associations enjoy Oxford, and it basically a cross section of Oxford. A lot of good dialogue, a lot of good questions were asked, discussions back and forth. I think we all kind of left there, focused on what is to be the deliverables. The hard thing was just trying to keep track in terms of the timeline and what has to be done when, gathering the information, and also realizing that a lot of this is being done primarily with Jessica and Sam in leading, the charge on this. So the timeline may be a little long, but that's basically because we're doing this in-house. So from a resource standpoint, whereas in the past, I did believe they brought a consultant in who pulled the whole thing together. This time they've decided to do it in-house, which I think is a good idea. And the other thing too is that this plan differs, I think, from the previous one, because the previous one focused primarily on land use, whereas this one gets into not only land use, but other aspects of Oxford. It's a more, when you hear comprehensive, a more inclusive plan, I think, is coming out of this. The other thing too is it's very much an interactive plan. The information that's out there or will be out there, the maps and so forth, incredible information has already been done and will be made available. How they want to collect the input, and not only input from people that live within Oxford, but also understanding we'll be getting information in from people that live in the surrounding areas and identifying them as best they can to determine, resident, student, Oxford Township, Riley, whoever submits things. as I mentioned earlier, they are planning to send out a survey in October. The other thing they're going to do to augment that will be to have up in the Uptown Park, and I think in other locations, there'll be boxes put out. Basically, think of them almost as suggestion boxes where people can write in, put down their comments and submit them that way. So a way of just gathering everything in. So, okay. So that's what's going on from there. The first two deliverables focus basically on what is your current state for H. And I looked at it from an HAPC standpoint and tried to break it down into a series of sections, basically the membership, the government's documents, the historical preservation, and public perception. And as I said, I don't want to go through every single line by line, but I do want to point out a couple of highlights, and that is how we are working to bring together. We've got the inventory done. We've got the codified ordinance updated. The next piece will be the design guidelines, the expansion, possible expansion of the historic district to define another area. Also looking to bring in, while we don't have anything direct with Miami, it is one of the things I think we need to kind of look at. So, and I'm going to jump ahead for just a second and say, as we went through the existing conditions and working with both Edna and Sean, they were the subcommittee, and they were great in terms of feedback and comments and really giving me some good guidance in terms of input on this. Is we were collected and basically put them in parking lot. I labeled them as parking lot, the short-term and long-term goals that as we identified them in the course of fleshing out the existing conditions, such as establishing something more formal with Miami so that we have a better interface with that. The other major point, one of them was as we've seen lately, most recently with the effort that Dana led on the EGI marker, because we have historical in our name, we end up with historic, basically sometimes being the recipient of anything related to history. But as we talked in the subgroup, and this is one that I want to thank Edna for really staying with us on, is the fact that there's a lot going on within the history of Oxford, but yet there's really no designated area or person or party to collect this information, whether it be about the different neighborhoods that make up Oxford, the historic buildings and structures, and some of the story that talks about the history of Oxford. I know we've touched on it with some of the work we've done in terms of proving COAs that have a plaque on it, whether it be the funeral home. I know they're going to put a plaque on that. The building that's going on uptown, the new building up on High Street, having a plaque there. But it's kind of, piecemeal. And one of the recommendations, and I know our recommendations don't come in until much later though, was the need for some assignment of someone to be the keeper of this history. Now, whether that means expanding the scope of HAPC to get into that, or it's, it goes to another area, is it handled in-house staff or some other party? But now is an opportunity where we need to kind of get that initiative on the radar because the longer we go, the less likely, keeping the history. We've got great relationships with Smith Library and so on, and maybe they're the ones that end up being the keeper of it. But right now it's kind of loosely collected. You've got the group that sponsors the historic tours. As I said, we get involved in it. We touch it a little bit. It's kind of hodgepodge and catch as catch can. Can we kind of formalize that piece in there and kind of bring that piece together? The other thing that we focus on in terms of public perception, and this came up in some of our subcommittee meetings, and that, do people really know what HAPC does? And it was interesting, the feedback that we got, and Edna, I'm going to paraphrase here, but it's like she was approached by someone and basically said, you know what HAPC does? they say no. And it kind of made me crack up. I'm looking at Corey right now laughing, because when you think back about it, the entire time I've been on serving on the commission, I know of only one instance where we turned something down flat out and said no. Everything else we've come to either approving it as submitted or working with the architect, the developer, the owner, or whatever, to kind of come to a good place. But I don't see HAPC as being no, but I think part of what's happening is we have a few isolated instances. And Sam, if I misstate this, bring me back in. For example, we approved the COA for the funeral home. And with that was the demolition permit, but they can't demolish it until they submit their formal plans for what are they going to replace it with. But that hasn't come in yet. But he wants to tear it down. And we won't give him the demolition permit until we see the final plans. So the perception there is no.
I think that is larger than HAPC. I think there are some people who think that city commissions do that. They just put up hurdles and they don't, make things happen, which is not true, but that's what the
perception.
Some people perceive. And I think that is a problem.
Right. So that's why I think it was important to call out that in terms of the existing conditions, we do have this perception issue. In working, hand in hand with that, one of our, objectives is to kind of get some notoriety, get some word of mouth out, or just through various sources to let people know what exactly is the role and function of HAPC. What do they do? What don't they do? One of the suggestions we talked about was with the monthly newsletter that comes out from the city, perhaps each month take a different commission or board and talk about that so people get familiar with it. Okay, put something out on a website that talks more about what they do and so forth. Just the idea that perhaps creating a more consistent image or understanding of exactly the role of HAPC, and as Edna says, the same thing with other commissions, whether it be the Arts Commission, whether it be the Planning Commission, the Police Relations, all of them. Just understanding of that.
Chris, I love that idea. And again, I mean, there's bandwidth and logistics issues, but I've been on planning for years and I've been on HAPC for years. And in those two capacities, I have only attended city council once or twice. So the reason I say that is not that I don't pay attention to city council or I'm aware of what's going on, but even some of the design, that's the most viewed forum. And to Edna's point, it's, people don't understand. Well, I mean, you made the point too. People don't understand what we do. So, putting on a planning lens, a lot of what comes to planning is requests to vary or permission to not go with codified ordinance. So if people understood that, they would, it would be more palatable because, and Chris and Sam know I've joked about this. I can't tell you how many of my friends and neighbors say, well, we don't need another, this kind of restaurant or that kind of restaurant. I'm like, that's not what planning does. So we don't approve the next fast food restaurant. They talk about the signage, but so really, even if we were to provide those resources, I think we need a platform that people see or pay attention to, because we could put a lot of great resources on the website, but that doesn't drive people to look at or to the website to look at it. So even if it was just, maybe Chris, you have the opportunity to talk for 90 seconds about HAPC, hey, here's what we're doing in historic architecture, or Dana can present the sign, things where people really get a tangible product that they're like, oh, so that's what they do. I think that would be great. And city council just came to mind. I don't know if that's the...
And Corey, not trying to pile on, but again, the idea that when there is the public comments section, the city council meeting, just hey, let me give you an update. I know Sam and I usually work hand in hand with that so that the council is kept up to date in terms of what's going on. And Edna can attest to, there are reports that come out and so forth. But I see kind of where you're going in terms of it's an opportunity to get in front of the viewing audience. And if they're looking at the city council meeting or, that's just one avenue of approach to take. The other thing is the newsletter. I think it's going to take, things coming in from multiple angles. But I think it's a benefit to it's not just an HAPC issue. I think it affects other commissions as well. And I think
I think a challenge for the whole entire strategic planning is what exactly the citizen perception about what is being planned. In other words, we can't plan that there not be, 17 pizza places when if there are 16. We can't. There are certain things we can't plan, and people don't understand that. So that communication issue is part of the whole problem, and is certainly one of the challenges of this whole strategic planning process. So our role as HAPC is to look at what we are doing and to try to help publicize what we do and achieve it in a more maybe public way.
Agreed. So before I move on, does anybody have any questions about? Hopefully, you had a chance to look through the subcommittee put together in terms of the existing conditions. Does anybody have anything that you think requires modification, or did we leave something out, or did we overdo something? That's kind of what I wanted to get out to this group, before the deadline to say, hey, is there something in there? I think we could encounter things such as this perception thing. It may show up through other commissions and so forth, so there may be overlap. But right now, I wanted to make sure we didn't lose sight of it within HAPC. Okay.
I didn't have know that there was that negative perception of the HAPC. But I guess, part of that perception would be kind of going back, to the original intention of when the commission was created back in the 80s. And, was it Thomas Dutton that put it together? Is that,
It's funny you mentioned that. Sam and I were talking about, a couple of weeks ago in his office, we were talking about it and saying, sometimes what HAPC basically came about because there was all the concern about the amount of demolition that was going on. All about it was more structural, more of the tangible, the buildings focused. We've now kind of morphed into, as I said earlier, the historical aspects, the non building type items, the EGI things, some of the work we do, in terms of, and I like, Corey, you're, helping out on the historic tours, Edna's work on the historic tours and things like that, the touch points. But when you go back to it and say, sometimes, like in terms of should HAPC pick up this becoming the city historian of sorts, you also have to go back and say, but what was the original charter? What was the original role of HAPC?
Yeah, I think that's in the material, though.
Right. There is a need. I'm just curious. I'm not trying to downplay it within HAPC, but it's kind of where it should be. I will share with you the one concern, and I promise I'll stop my comments after this. As a historical, as respects history, it's important that there be a continuance of it. Mm-hmm. And yet within our commission, based on people, being, appointed to the commission and serving their term and then, leaving, that you have that disruption. Mm-hmm. There is someone there all the way through. So that's why in some ways I'm concerned about, is HAPC a right place for it to be, or is there another party that would be better suited for it? So
I think we all agree, don't we, that it's mainly the tangible structures are our must be our focus. But those buildings have a history, and that's where history comes in, as well as the collective history of our community. But when I was saying about, and the negative perceptions that I was communicating really are or sharing really go across the board in terms of how a certain part of our population feels about government. You know, they think there's too much government. So I mean, there's not much we can do about that. We've got to govern. But we have to be aware, or perhaps we should be aware, that is, you know, a factor in the world in which we live. There are people who think there should be less government. You know, I can't do anything about it. Maybe we can't, none of us can, but we just should be aware of it.
Speaking of government, one thing that stood out to me, and first I want to compliment I don't want to say analysis, but the reference to Miami, and that one of the historic districts is fully contained within Miami. I thought like I said, analysis, I guess, of the relationship or lack of the interaction, the growing interaction. I think Dana and folks Dr. James have done a great job of bridging that, but all too often the entire relationship is relied either on staff to staff or the town gown. So the reason I bring that up is there's two things. I know that when Miami tore down Ann Richards, no, she was the governor of Texas. Never mind.
Yeah, right.
Alice Lloyd.
Mary Lyons.
Mary Lyon.
Mary Lyons.
Mary Lyon. There you go. And by the way, Alice Lloyd is a Hallett, Michigan. I knew it was somewhere in there. But when they tore that down, there were a lot of folks, and that was across from my office at Hoyt, and there were folks who had an opinion about it, and they didn't realize Miami is state, Oxford is city, but also they weren't as familiar with the structural integrity. I had actually walked by one time when part of the roof fell down 10 or 15 feet behind a group of people. So I think if we could educate folks more on that relationship as well. When Swing Hall was torn down, I know there were people, oh, but that's a 100-year-old building. Again, that wasn't the purview of our commission or the city per se, but also there was a lot more to the story than people knew. So maybe it could simply be encouraging Miami to share more information. And again, I know these plans exist, it's public record. I know they report on these things, but much like we had shared, kind of the work is hidden. If they were to say, hey, this is happening and here's why, I think that might pacify, because from a citizen or an alumni standpoint, Oxford and Miami are very much one and the same. I mean, we were founded as College Township, West College Corner. So, I mean, we are here as a city because the university was founded 2 years earlier. So if we could really encourage them to help us, you know, share the information, and there was talk of, you know, the relationship and maybe an ex officio from Miami on our commission, because there is a seamlessness to us. So something along those lines, I think would be really helpful, because I think it will confuse people that the Western Historic District was designated by the city, but we have limited say in what happens there.
And I think we need something more permanency to it, other than the ad hoc exchange that occurs every now and then. That's all, you know, even if we just start out with that, but then again, that gets into more of the short-term objectives, you know, and as long-term is establishing a more, you know, formal relationship. Corey, I like the idea. Do we have somebody just as you serve from the planning commission? Could we have somebody that sits in and it may be a non-voting, just participates in the meeting, is aware of things, you know, that type of thing. So we'll see how that goes. Again, not to, you know, drag out tonight, but is there anything else within the existing conditions that you think needs modification?
I had a question. You said there were some people from Miami University involved in the steering.
There were one or two sitting there.
You remember who they were? Or?
I forget. It was Sam. You may know.
Yeah, I can comment on that. Unfortunately, they're not from physical facilities. So yeah, they're from the Aspire office, which is the new office
No,
and then
Randy.
also student life. So yeah,
Okay.
Randy Thomas and Scott Walter, but
Yeah.
that helps with some things on the operational side, but not necessarily on the physical facilities. So, and I was going to add a comment too, that Miami is the biggest investor in historic preservation, but also the biggest violator when it comes to historic preservation. So it's in the things that Corey was talking about, the things I've been documenting that they don't pat themselves on the back for. You know, when they repaint the cornice details on Hall Auditorium, nobody knows that. But then when they want to tear down Patterson Place, everybody knows that. You know, and so that doesn't help the image any. So anyway, just wanted to leave you with that.
I just kind of thinking off the top of my head, but some sort of interaction with the group that maintains the master plan of the university, which would be PFD,
Yeah.
Robert Bell.
Yep.
You know what?
I
One
agree.
thing- was
Cody, wouldn't it be Cody Powell too? Robert
yeah,
Cody?
sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I noticed about employees at Miami, and a lot of them don't live in Oxford, and so there is that kind of disconnect for
Right.
sure.
I think the other piece of it, I know I've attended a couple of city council meetings, and I often ask, so why don't we have somebody more, other than the Miami student or the Oxford Observer? Why don't we have more people from the university, other than the people that, Mike Smith and so that, work for the university on the city council? But you'd think that you'd like to see more interaction, more of that public comments, of have them come up and say, hey, here's what's going on, and things like that, to encourage the partnership. But enough of that. So, okay. The other thing I want to touch on is the other deliverable we've got, which is due June 30th. And that was the questions for the community survey. And it kind of went through there. And I kind of led with kind of a big one. And in terms of, and I'm going to paraphrase here, do you really care about historic and architectural preservation? On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it? And are you aware of the historical things and so forth that go on? Are you aware that we've got the 3 districts, and it's more of kind of an awareness piece. I didn't want to list out 40 questions for 2 reasons. Number one, our questions will be incorporated in with the other questions that come out of the other boards and commissions. And number 2, if it gets too long, then people are going to start about question 6, just either not responding, abandoning it, or just not putting in anything meaningful. So I try to keep the questions, down to about 6 questions. So, and the idea of, would you support another historic, the idea of creating the historic districts? Do you even care? What about the height? Now, Sam, I would imagine Sam and Corey, that may come out of planning as well. I'm not sure. So that question may find itself in another place in the survey, if it doesn't.
Yeah, I've actually got my own pet project on that too, where I'm planning to hire a consultant to study the feasibility of raising the building heights across the entire community. Right. So it's good to ask that question in a different context. We've got the operational and the utilities and the fire protection side of it, but then there's also the community character side of it. And so it's good to have those in different buckets. So as people are going through this community survey, I'm not sure all the questions will be included, but if they have an opinion on this thing, but also on the other, then that will help inform us as to whether there's a need for a compromise.
True. So as you look at the questions, is there any questions, of the 6 questions I asked, do you think we should eliminate any of them? Or are you good with what's there? Should we add another question or 2? Did we miss something? Okay.
I mean, maybe it'd just be a matter of rewording, but does this commission bring any to add value to as a citizen?
Yeah.
Maybe I just add that into question 1, or does having historic preservation add value to your life or quality of life of living here?
What I would like to, if we are going to add that question, if everybody wants, I'd like to add that as a separate question. Do you see a value in having a commission that is focused on historic and architectural preservation? Separate from question one, because question one basically says, how important is it to you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I can add a question in there to that effect.
Okay.
Chris, I don't have a question or the wording, but when I read through the questions just a second ago, I something caught my attention that I hadn't noticed before. All except for the districts, all the questions, if I read them correctly, referred to historic and architectural structures, and we had talked earlier about were the historic and architectural preservation. So again, I don't have the solution, but maybe if one of the questions could talk about the history of Oxford and our area, or really emphasize that, because candidly, I was on the commission before I truly comprehended that. Not that I hadn't read through, but I forgot what we were talking about. And we're like, yeah, we focus on buildings. We don't really focus on the history. Mm-hmm. So if we're going to ask questions about us existing or our purview and our parameter, I think we should also make sure that, well, I want people to know what we do, but also see, because I could understand if somebody's like, it's a building, bricks, they'll build another one, it'll look the same. Oxford always makes things look old. And the reason that I think that's valid is, I think I shared with you guys, one of the games I used to play with my dad when he visited Oxford is guess what year that building on campus was built. And he was always off because, one of the dorms built in 1956 looked identical to one built in 1901. So I think in our town, that can be deceiving for a lot of people, because when we approve something uptown, it's new, but it still kind of has that old feel. That completely misses all the work that Dana's worked on, the discussion Edna, you and I had with others a few years ago about the predominantly Black African-American neighborhood on the north side of town. That had nothing to do with buildings. So I want to make sure that's not lost.
Perhaps, in Corey, as you were talking, I just tried to ask a question, and I can work on this a bit, something to the extent of, do you care about preservation of the history of Oxford? Yeah. Kind of simple that, that way.
One of the lessons somebody wise once said to me, and this is relevant to all kinds of things you do, including raising children, never ask a question that you don't want to hear the answer to. Mm-hmm. So if we ask a question that is, do you care about it? And people say no, we don't want to hear that. We would like them to understand, rather, that the historic buildings have a history, and that the history of our community in all its aspects is worth preserving. So, I think that that's going to be the challenge, I think, of doing this survey, because we don't want to ask where people say, no, we don't care. We don't want it. We want to find out how to make things better, but we don't want to give the nihilists and the anarchists a chance. Is that fair? A chance to downplay everything that is valuable that we do. That's like asking, a university asking, do you even care about education?
Yeah.
Do you care when people are educated? That's the mission of a university. So of course, people should care about education. So those are my 2 cents.
Yeah. So Edna, just so I understand, so you're kind of like of the idea, leaning towards we shouldn't ask the question.
No, we should be careful how we ask it.
Okay. So I'll work on
because we should be prepared.
I shouldn't be so blunt with, do you care? I have to find a better way of a delicate way of asking.
Yeah, I've got some ideas, Chris, on that.
Do you support the preservation, efforts at preserving the history of Oxford? Something to that effect. Okay. It's a start. That's what I needed tonight, just to give me something to work with. But the other questions we're good with? Okay.
Yep.
All right. So this is what I'll do is I'll see if I work on that. And again, this goes in to the be submitted by the end of the month. I'll probably have it in by the end of this week, Sam, just so you're not inundated with them at the end. And by the way, I've kept Sam kind of in the loop on this all along, so that there was no aha moment tonight, if we could avoid it.
I got a couple of questions still.
Yeah.
The city council approved the updated codified ordinance. I still have like a backlog work item that I'm doing from a couple months ago. Sam, you sent me the links to the codified ordinances, and I was doing the cheat sheet, and I just need to go. That's kind of related to what I was doing or supposed to be doing.
Yeah, trying to do the
Leakage.
the decision standards.
Yeah. But Sam, you had another task that I'm gonna do. I just haven't done it yet.
Yeah, I kind of forgot about that, but thank you. Yeah, so our website has the hyperlinks for the codes.
Yeah.
I think your project was, if you had time, was to kind of streamline the way that the code is linked to the decision so that we can kind of more dynamically say, does this comply or does it not?
Yeah.
Just to go through it a little bit quicker.
So I just want to let you know that I haven't forgotten about that.
Okay.
Thanks.
It's on my task board. And then I just wanted to clarify. So when Sean came on board, that fulfilled the requirement of a business owner,
Yes.
or because of his role of.
The
I
uptown.
thought Houston fulfilled that.
Oh,
Not in the historic district.
Right.
I don't think I'm going to qualify for that.
But we appreciate you just Houston, not only for your participation, but the fact that you're also a business owner in the area,
And have historical knowledge of the community.
Yes, he does.
yep.
So anyway, okay.
That's it.
He owns 1% of the Fan Shin building.
So I'll work on that and work on the question and then kick it in, and Sam and I will do some wordsmithing as needed. But I want to thank everyone for tonight. I just wanted to get in front, make sure, at least from an idea standpoint and concept wise, we're in alignment, that we're heading in the right direction and we should go ahead with this. We'll see what comes out at the end state. So the next deliverables, if you want to go ahead and look at what I've kind of started jotting down in terms of short-term and long-term goals, that's fine. But we got time on that. Let's kind of see what happens over the next several months in terms of the public feedback and so forth. All right.
Thanks for your work on this, Chris and Ed.
Thank you. And again, my thanks to Edna and Sean for their time and feedback and keeping me on within the guardrails on this thing. So we'll go from there. Okay. Moving on, agenda wise. What do we have, Sam? We had one admin approval?
Yeah, we had thank you. We had administrative approval for a very large window project on an existing fraternity across from McGuffey Hall there, 206 South Campus. So on one of the fraternity rows. So they're existing vinyl windows, and they're just, after 25 years, they just kind of get weak. And so they're replacing them like they are. So I asked them to make some other tweaks to improve the facade of the building as part of that, which they agreed to, and that was it.
Yep. We'll go from there. So, that's from there. Sam and I were talking briefly before the meeting. There's a couple of things that had been approved in prior years that haven't surfaced up yet or whatever. So we'll see what's going on from there. The Halil Center is one, and I think that's the one that comes to mind. Everything else is kind of moving along. 45 East is getting there, and I see there's some construction equipment up on College and High Street there. And then we talked briefly tonight about the funeral home and going from there. So, okay.
The Dudleys are still working on a plan.
Yeah.
I've had one phone call with them asking about their deadline, so I'm not optimistic.
Okay.
Because their deadline is this September. They've got to have a building permit, which usually takes 3 or 4 months. So I'm not optimistic. So they may come in and ask for an extension. I'm not sure.
Mhm. But we've been kind of saying no demolition without the, without the plan.
Right.
Okay. The last thing I know I had, and I want to just open anything else. I know, Dana, you've got a big event coming up in the next week or two. We've got the EGI.
Yes.
Yes, Sam, you mentioned that in the email. Thank you. On Monday, June 21st at 9 a.m. is
Yes.
the dedication of the marker.
Yes.
I
It's
know
still
I've got
not
it.
here yet, but they said it's going to come the week of the 14th. And working on the plan for that. And there's a civil rights conference going on the 21st, 22nd. So there's, it was designed in conjunction with that. So there'll be people participating in that, participating in that ceremony.
Okay.
So Enjoy Oxford. Sorry, Edna. Enjoy Oxford created a little marker about the marker that has a QR code and a summary on the back. And then the QR code is going to link to the Enjoy Oxford website about Black history, plaques, and memorials. So, yeah.
Would they going to have those there at the event, or?
Yeah, these are for the attendees of the event.
Okay, very nice. Cool.
Dana, did you say they moved it to the 21st? I had it as the 22nd.
21st.
Okay.
I might have said the 22nd at one time.
Yeah,
No, that's
I
fine.
apologize if I did.
yeah, 21st,
It's the 21st at 9. And you can register for the conference. That's available too if you want to.
Mhm.
Okay. I had 2 questions. Can I ask?
please.
The right time? I wanted to ask the maps that have been created for the strategic planning that I have in the little booklet that all council members got and that everybody on the strategic planning committee got. Are those maps going to be on the city's website, or are they already on the city's website?
They are already.
That's what I thought.
Yep. That's the book.
Already. So all these people who are, so computer savvy and they don't seem to know how to get to them. I don't know. I was sure they were, but I didn't know for sure. And my second question is maybe procedurally, could you clarify what's going to happen with the civil rights mural? Will that come before that Ella Cope initiated? Is that going to come before HAPC, Sam?
Yes, if it's submitted, it's supposed to be. Nothing's been submitted.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Just wondering.
Okay. Do we have anything else? I think that completes everything we had on the agenda, Sam.
It's not on the agenda, and but I just wanted to share because it's the reciprocity between the 2 commissions. Last night we did approve the Elms Annex property. So I mean there was a pretty hefty discussion, and all in all it went through as presented, and a lot of the concerns are I shared with them kind of on behalf of Chris and I that, the tools we had at our disposal were limited, as well as the fact that, that's why we have timeframes and timelines. And so we made sure that all the concerns of the staff, or as many as possible, were included. And a lot of them are codified in ordinance. So, but I just wanted to report back that that did pass, and Zach and Sam did a heck of a job of shepherding this situation. So I appreciate that. And also working with Chris on it.
Yeah, I kept mentioning Sam and Jessica, but we also had other people, helping out on the presentation. I thought it was a really good steering committee meeting, Sam. It was a good opportunity, and also a good chance to see some people. Having a face-to-face meeting was very different. Speaking of which, our next meeting, our July HAPC meeting, I know you've all enjoyed being here and Zooming it in and so forth, will be an in-person meeting. this marks the end of our Zoom sessions unless something else rears its head. But please plan on the next, the meeting in July. We will have an in-person meeting in the courthouse. For those of you that remember that far back like we used to. But that's what's going on. Okay.
I wanted to say thanks, Sam, for sending that link for that citizen planner training. I signed up for that and took, still haven't completed it, but I've been working through them. So
Okay.
thank you. It was interesting.
So, is there anything else, folks? If not, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Move.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. And Houston, I can't wait to see you next month. Just if I stop in beforehand, it is just a remarkable transformation. I just got to say, what a difference.
I'm rarely jealous, but I'm not friends with him anymore. Like, he's killing me in the weight loss game.
I know. I'm really feeling bad now.
Everybody went the other way mostly. Houston.
Yep. Yes.
Right.
It's time.
So,
Thank you for sharing, Houston.
yes.
Yeah, no problem. It's
Yeah.
hopefully it's good for everybody. So
Yep. All right. So with that, this concludes the meeting this evening. If we don't talk beforehand, I'll see you next month.
All right.
great.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.